If you haven't already checked out part 1 of the generator human design type, you can do that right now. But if not, let's get started and find out more about the generator type, the sacral response, and the strategy for a generator. In part 1, we talked about what a generator was and how all generators have a defined sacral and a non-motorized throat. We talked about the theme of frustration, how generators are the workers of all the human design types. So now let's talk about the sacral response and also the strategy for generator types. There are two ways a generator type can find the right path for them. The first is their sacral response, and the second is using their strategy. And we'll talk about strategy later, but for now, let's talk about the sacral response and what it means for a generator. Because generator types have a defined sacral, it acts like an internal compass that can put them on the right path if they let it. The sacral response in a generator can also be called the gut response and is an internalized answer to questions about their life that has less to do about their thoughts and inspirations and more to do with this internal compass or instinct. And how does a generator use their sacral response? Well, they can ask themselves a question or even have somebody else ask a question and respond with a yes or no answer immediately and without thought. And their answer may be something that they might not have expected. Because they allowed their head to get out of the equation, they're able to come up with something that works for them on an instinctive level. An example of this sacral response might be if you're writing a test and you look at a question and immediately you get an answer to that question. But then you think about it more and then you decide to change your answer. The first answer is usually your gut or sacral response, and usually 9 out of 10 times is correct. When generators overthink their responses, they can make a decision that isn't right for them and regret their choice. So connecting with the gut or sacral response is very helpful in a generator's life. You may be thinking that a generator and a manifesting generator sound a lot alike. Well, that is true, but there are a few ways that they're different as well. We already talked about a manifesting generator having a motorized throat, and a generator does not, and that a generator type needs people, whereas a manifesting generator doesn't. But there's also something else that happens when someone doesn't have a motorized throat, and it's quite important because this can also cause frustration in a generator type. Because what it means is that they may not be heard and recognized as easily as a manifesting generator type. And in fact, if a generator type starts talking to somebody without being recognized first, they may not be received in the best possible way. Because energetically, they're just different from a manifesting generator because of the speed of the energy that gets to the throat. And what that means is that when a generator type wants to be heard, to get the best response, it's better for them to wait to be acknowledged or for someone to say, "What do you think about that?" or "What's your opinion?" or even for someone to initiate conversation with them. With any of those responses, they'll be recognized and they can speak in a way that they're going to be heard the best. But if they're talking to people without being recognized first, they can come off as pushy and people may not respond to them in a positive way. And another way a manifesting generator and a generator are different is how they do their work. A generator type is slow and deliberate in how they get their job done and take the amount of time they need to do it right, where a manifesting generator jumps from one task to another rapidly and may actually finish before the generator type, but because they have to go back and correct the things that they missed and the mistakes that they've made, they usually end up finishing exactly at the same time as the generator. And one more thing that's true for all generator types is that because they have a full battery of energy every day, to get the best sleep possible, they need to burn all that energy so their battery is completely depleted so that they can have a very restful sleep. And the way that they burn their energy is usually by exercise. So although exercise is important for all types, it's especially important for generator types. If there's anything that's true about human design, is that even Ra Uru Hu, who would be considered the father of human design and the human design system, always said that what we're supposed to do with human design is experiment with what works. Because just like anything else in life, there is no one size that fits all. So to find out what's best for us, we need to experiment. So if you're interested in experimenting and finding out more about the strategy type for the generator, then you can keep listening as we talk about the strategy for the human design generator type. What exactly is a strategy in human design? Well, your strategy comes from your type and is the most important knowledge offered by human design. It gives key information about how to operate in the world, and it aids in you making the right decisions for yourself and also helps recognize when you're on the right path in your life. And each of the human design types have their own strategy. And because manifesting generators and generator types were not separated into two categories when human design first started, their strategy is exactly the same. But just because it's the same doesn't make it any less powerful than it is for any other type. If you've already watched the Manifesting Generator human design type, this will look familiar. But if not, let's go over the strategy for a generator type, which is you first envision, then you wait for something tangible to show up in your outside reality. If you're not defined emotionally, then you would respond or not. But if you are emotionally defined, then you would wait for clarity and then you would respond or not. So if you're undefined emotionally, you would use your sacral response. But if you're defined emotionally, you wait for clarity through your emotional wave. But what exactly is your emotional wave? If someone is defined emotionally, or they have a brown triangle on the right-hand side, then that means they have an emotional wave. And because they have an emotional wave, that affects their strategy. And what that means is that when you're undefined emotionally and a decision comes up, you should act in the moment and make the decision. But if you're defined emotionally and a decision comes up, the theory is that you're supposed to wait for your emotional wave to make a decision. Or in the case of the generator, to respond to an opportunity or a sign in the tangible world. In human design, the emotional wave is described as all the range of motions and of feelings that someone cycles through before returning to the beginning. So, for instance, you wake up in the morning and you're feeling happy, everything looks amazing outside, and you're just in a great mood. By lunchtime, you're starting to feel a little bit lower. You're not down, but you're just feeling a little bit less elated than you were in the morning. By dinner time, you feel melancholy. You want to be alone, you don't want to talk to anybody, and you just want to close the door and ignore the world outside. Then you go to bed, and the next morning you feel on top of the world again. Now, of course, most times emotional waves are not that quick, but it's just an example of what an emotional wave looks like. And everybody who's defined emotionally will have their own way of expressing their emotional wave. Some people have it for hours, some people have it for days, and some people even have it for weeks. When a generator is emotionally defined and they get something to respond to, the theory is that they should wait for the emotional wave to find clarity to make sure that they're responding to the right things for them. So, for instance, somebody asks you if you want to collaborate on a project, and in that moment it sounds like a wonderful idea, and you immediately say yes, only to discover in a few days that you may not be as enthusiastic about doing the project as you thought you were. But now that you've already agreed to it, you're pretty much stuck with your decision. But if you had waited for your emotional wave, you might have discovered that it wasn't necessarily something you wanted to do after all. For most people who are emotionally defined, this story sounds pretty familiar, where you're jumping into things that you necessarily don't want to do later on. And the odd thing about having an emotional wave is that it makes you want to respond yes much quicker than somebody who is not emotionally defined. In fact, they would prefer to wait longer to make the decision, when in fact they're supposed to make the decision in the moment. If you have an emotional wave, the way to get clarity, to know if it's right for you or not, is to wait for your emotional wave. So for a generator type, they get something to respond to. But instead of saying yes immediately, they go through their emotional wave. And if they feel positive at all points of their emotional wave, then usually it's right for them. But if at any point they feel negative towards that opportunity or decision, then it's better to leave it alone and let it go, because it may not be in their best interest and, in fact, may be a waste of their time. So now that we know about the emotional wave, what does the strategy look like in practice? So, for instance, you're wondering if you should take an online course that you're interested in. You check out the website and it seems a little expensive, and you're not sure if you're willing to spend the money. The next day, you check out the website and see that they have a 25% off special. This would be considered a sign in your outside reality that the decision is correct for you. If you're emotionally defined, you'd wait for clarity, but if not, you would respond yes or no based on what you feel is right for you. In part 1, we talked about a generator and how they can become frustrated when they reach a plateau in their career, when they're not recognized for the contribution that they can give, and also when they're initiating without something to respond to in the universe and things are not going as well as they expected. But by experimenting with their sacral response and also their strategy, a generator can find exactly what they're looking for. Mastery in their work, whatever that is, it doesn't matter. Satisfaction in what they're doing and the right path for them. And when they find the right work and they're on the right path, they'll have all the energy they need to get through their day. And whatever fatigue they have will be a normal fatigue, not a frustrated fatigue that comes from doing things that you don't love. And by finding the right work and being on the right path, they'll finally find the happiness that everyone's looking for and fulfill their destiny and also their place in the big scheme of life. Knowing your type is just the beginning of the information that the body graph will show you. But I'm going to stop here for now and let you digest what I've talked about. And make sure to check out my other videos where you can learn more and more information about human design and the body graph and all about you. Because when we truly know who we are, life just gets easier.